Hello, in the last two episodes, my colleague Pavel introduced you to this router table, its advantages, what it can do, and what you can work on with it. That it's often much better than just working with the router alone. Now it's my turn to show you how to install the router into the router table. For that purpose, I chose one of the best yet still affordable routers, which are also designed for installation into a router table. So let's get started. Of course, you can put any other router into this table, and that's because a universal mounting plate is used. The mounting plate is attached to the router table with 4 countersunk screws and metric threads. After unscrewing all the screws, this kind of mounting plate will pop out from under the table. It's a solid steel plate nearly 3 mm thick. The next step is to remove the plastic washer from the base plate of the router, which is again attached with 4 countersunk screws and a PH2 cross slot. We will now use the removed plastic protective washer essentially as a template for drilling holes into this mounting plate. This router is quite specific in that it comes from Australia, so definitely keep all 4 screws, which have a different thread than the standard metric ones we use. You might need to rotate the base a bit. It also depends on you, of course, in what position you want the router under the router table so that the individual controls of this router are as accessible as possible for you. Once you have carefully decided on the position of the router relative to the mounting plate, place the plastic protective plate and mark the spots where the mounting screws will go with a marker. You can also transfer the holes from the plastic protective washer to the mounting plate by tracing them. I prefer to use a silver or white marker, which is great to see on the black sheet. Hitting the center of a smaller circle is then a bit easier. The mounting screws have a diameter of 6 mm in our case. We drill holes with a diameter of at least 6 mm, preferably larger, in case we don't manage to drill those holes perfectly, so there's some play. Finally, we create a countersink for all 4 holes, so that the mounting screws fit nicely and the heads don't stick out. Now it's time to mount the mounting plate to the base of the router. We won't be using the original plastic washer anymore, and will directly install a metal mounting plate. We will center it so that it fits the original holes and use, as I mentioned, the original screws that will fit perfectly into the threads of the router's base. Now you are looking at the chain that controls the lift of the router using a crank. To know where the crank will lead to the base plate, there is a groove, and we will also need to file the corresponding groove in the mounting steel plate. A quicker, though less elegant, way is to cut the groove using a die grinder. Now nothing prevents us from placing the handle in its position. When turning the handle, the lifting mechanism of the router moves. We have the mounting plate attached to the router, so we can attach the router to the table. The fact that it is upside down is not due to the mounting itself, as we wouldn't be able to tighten the screws from the other side. Rather, it's to test in what position we will mount the router to the table. This is important specifically for the control handle, so that it doesn't accidentally end up in places where we have rulers or stops, because every time we want to use the handle to change the milling height, we would have to remove those stops, and we definitely don't want that. We'll measure the diameter of the handle. It is exactly 11 mm. So we will need a drill bit that's a bit larger. I happen to have a 1.2, so that will be just perfect. But you can definitely use a 12 as well. We don't even need to pre-drill because we're drilling into aluminum, which is soft, so it will go smoothly. And here we are at the finale. Let's install the router into the table. So you can finish the rest nicely with an electric screwdriver, using a reliable and efficient electric screwdriver to ensure that every part is securely fastened and completed with precision. And if we measure correctly and drill precisely, the handle should fit perfectly. Bingo! you'll definitely notice that it goes a bit harder upward. And I'll tell you why. It's because there's a compression spring in this column. Right on the router, it says that if we want to use it in the milling table, it's good to remove this spring. But be careful when doing it, because it's really well sprung and will pop out like a jack-in-the-box. So it's better to remove this spring when using the router in the milling table, and it will be much easier to handle it upward. Each full turn of the knob by 360 degrees means a lift of 1 millimeter. The scale on this wheel is divided into 10 segments, from which you can deduce that you can raise or lower the router with a precision of 0.1 millimeters. The reserve table has its own switchable socket, so you just need to plug the cable from the router into one of them. Then you can turn on the router with the main safety switch. We also can't avoid controlling it with the safety switch directly on the router if we want to use the spindle lock. So we need to turn off the switch, which activates the safety shield, allowing us to raise the router all the way up, locking the spindle in place. And at the same time, the Call It Nicely comes up above the surface, making it easy for us to loosen it with one hand. Alternatively, we can completely unscrew it, replace it with a smaller one. That was a 12, this is an 8. We tighten it lightly by hand, and the rest we can tighten again with just one hand. Only when the router is lowered back to a safe position can we open the protective shield of the switch and turn it on. Great, task accomplished. Now the milling table is fully equipped for your work. And I have to say, this router is just perfect for it. So I recommend it and wish you a lot of cultivated and low-profile successes.